Welcome to Let's Play Rule the Waves 2 as France, starting in 1940. This is episode 27, and we are at peace. So, time to put our feet up and relax and not worry about anything other than crunching all the numbers and worrying about what to scrap, what to mothball, what to put in reserve, what to modernize, what to build, how to drag our fleet forward into the future based on our experiences of our recent war. In that war, the force to raid, my 28 knots, basically all the new ships of the French Navy, performed offensively pretty well. Yes, they didn't quite get the test of steel that they were hoping for because of the repeated pattern of nighttime battles, but I'm pretty happy that that's a really solid core and I definitely want to build that up. The German fleet, hooray! What great allies. Thank you very much, Germany. You can't rely on that, but, just occasionally the allies really do come good. Trade protection, that was fine. Yes, we did have the fuel shortage thing, but we were able to resolve that simply enough. And then finally, the 20-knot fleet, the old-timers, stuck back in Northern Europe, who didn't do anything. I've been reading quite a lot of naval history, as I do, most of the time, and I've been struck lately by accounting for things that didn't happen, which could have been very, very important. So, for example, Spain didn't join the Axis in World War II, which was incredibly important for keeping the Battle of the Atlantic much more on an even keel, or maintaining Gibraltar as a viable base, which therefore allows the Royal Navy and Britain to pursue a Mediterranean strategy. Things that didn't happen was, in our war, was the Americans didn't come to Northern Europe, and there was no blockade, and France stayed safe, all because of that 20-knot navy doing its quiet, unassuming thing. So, just because it wasn't covering itself in glory in battle, doesn't necessarily mean that it was unimportant. Ineffective. That submarine force that I was starting to build up, what a disaster. I got up to, I think it was 20 submarines. I couldn't put them into any realistic trade war. They were just a little bit too small and too far away, and in fleet support, they were rubbish. They didn't do anything. I think the Americans lost one corvette during the course of the war, despite the fact that half of my submarine force were mine layers. Really big disappointment. Land-based air, well, this is potentially a little bit unfair, in that when the war moved to the Mediterranean, where I had air bases, they started to get very, very effective, and had I allowed the war go on, they may have been quite a potent force. But certainly in a long-distance war, where you don't have bases, they're useless. And then raiders. Now, again, in fairness, I didn't put much effort. No, sorry, I didn't put any effort into raiders, but I don't know, the whole raiding thing just doesn't really meet my cost-effective balance. I mean, I need to explore that one day, but I wasn't impressed by their raiding efforts, and of course I didn't do any of my own. Losses were pretty modest, aside from loads and loads of rubbish submarines. Now, having said that, it is possible that the Americans had a much higher ASW value than I did, hence my submarines were very, very vulnerable, but I don't know. We lost 2 light cruisers, a few destroyers, mainly to submarines and mines, a couple of corvettes or 3, almost all of which was done by Italy in the couple of months that we were at war with Italy. The Americans did next to nothing other than take an inordinately long time to capture the Antilles. So, that's my sense of what was effective, what wasn't effective. What do we have now? Well, in terms of the main fleet, we still have this big divide between the force to raid, who can all make 28 or more knots, 6 battleships, 2 carriers, another one under construction, 2 light carriers, 2 heavy cruisers, 7 light cruisers, 14 destroyers, and another 6 destroyers under construction. So a pretty coherent force. A bit light on cruisers and destroyers, possibly. And then our legacy fleet, our 20-knot fleet. 10 battleships in that, a light carrier, couple more heavy cruisers, one more light cruiser out in the colonies, and 23 Yale destroyers who obviously get primarily put out to trade protection pasture. In addition to that, we've got a trade protection and colonial force. We've got the stub end of our submarine force, only 5 remaining. We've got just over 1,000 aeroplanes, and we've got a few fortifications in Europe. So that's what we've got to play with. Where really do we want to take it? And where we want to take it, I think, centrally depends on who do we want to have a war with. Here we've got our potential opponents. Here we've got the ratio of capital ships, and I'm including battleships, battlecruisers, and carriers in this. So Britain, 33 to 18. Okay, nearly twice as much. It's a difficult opponent, which is why I put it in amber. We would probably get blockaded by them, and we would be subject to invasions across our empire. And to really tackle them, we really would need to invest massively in a decent-sized submarine force. However, that massive investment isn't actually very costly because, of course, Britain is especially vulnerable to cheap coastal submarines. United States I've put in red as a no-no. 36 to 18, so, 2 to 1. Unable to fight them because we have no bases. If the last war taught me anything, it's 1, if you only have one base in your opponent's area, fortify it, and 2, only put your ships where you have that base because that will allow them to get repaired. I now have no bases in the Caribbean nor in the east coast of the USA, so I just can't get to them. 3, Japan. Now, 24 to 18, that's fine. That's pretty defeatable. It would need an improvement to our Asiatic bases. Our fleet capacity actually out in Southeast Asia isn't too bad. It would need a bit of a build-up, but not too much. And then the air bases would need substantial strengthening. But they are definitely a potential candidate, depending upon which way the gods of the tension graph take us. Italy, of course, is easy to defeat. Germany is also easy to defeat, but they've been a great ally. And the Soviet Union, very easy to defeat. So if we wanted a challenging war, it's really Japan or Britain that we should be after, despite the obvious difficulties with Britain. So here are our list of goodies, our build options, everything that we could possibly desire. I mean, within reason. So down here we have the different types of ships. Here we have the number of ships that we currently have in service. Here are those currently under construction. This is the option that I'm thinking about. Here's the number of ships that would leave us by 1943. Here's how much it would cost in the intervening 10 years. And here's the percentage of this particular item against everything totaled up. So as you can see, battleships, of which we currently have 16, we could have 17 by 43 at a cost of 747. Which is 48% of the cost of everything. So naturally, in battleships, there are the biggest savings to be found. I've plumped for building 3 new ones and potentially modernizing 6 more, leaving 2, the most recent ones, unmodernized, perhaps until the very, very end, and scrapping 2. Now, this could be adjusted. I could build fewer, I could scrap more, I could modernize less. CVs. I've coloured the CVs and the destroyers in green because I regard them kind of as non-negotiable. We haven't got enough new destroyers. Our number of old destroyers is too large. And CVs, of course, are the future. We already have 2. We've got another building. If we build 2 more, that will bring us up to 5. For a modest 10% of the cost of everything that we could build. Heavy cruisers, currently have 4. 2 of those are ancient and need scrapping, so I need at least 4 more to take us to 6. That's pretty expensive. Heavy cruisers cost a lot of money, particularly when you haven't got the Washington Naval Treaty and the London Naval Treaty keeping a cap on their size. Light cruisers, similarly, I have 8. 1 needs to be scrapped. So if I build 5 more, that will give us 12 for 10% of the budget. Destroyers already discussed. I want to go to at least 30 and possibly more, possibly 40. The old destroyers, of course, will be just put out to trade protection pasture, where they'll occasionally be handy. The corvettes, I took a few losses, I think 3, so I'm going to replace those and have some spares because I was a bit tight on colonies during the war. Take us up to 39 for a trivial cost of 1%. Problematic submarines. We have pathetic 5 remaining. If we build another 50, just straightforward SSs, that would cost 10% of the budget. Alternatively, if we were going to fight Britain, we could build 114 coastal submarines for the same amount of money. Lastly, forts, we have 8. If we built another 7 in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific to prepare for a war with Japan, that would also cost a trivial amount of money. But what's notable here is, I should just build the forts and I should build the corvettes anyhow. And I'm already a long way ahead with the destroyers, so they should probably carry on as well. The big savings are in the battleships and in the cruisers. Here's my calculation of bringing this down to earth. So if 1,567,000 was the cost of everything on my wish list, and I worked that out over 120 months, I would need construction to be running at something like 13,000 a month for 120 months to build all of that lot. However, my current construction is 5,800. Not 13,000. Now, I had a little play with the game, a little sandbox exercise just to carry it forward, just to see how long it would take before I got to some sort of more stable place. Once I'd done some scrappings and refits and mothballing and reserve and colonial fleet adjustments and all of that little bit of argy-bargy that you have to do at the beginning of peace, to stabilize and optimize your peacetime navy. And I got to June 35 to 9,900, not 13,000. Now, eventually, it's true, economic growth will take us towards 13,000, but I don't know how long it's going to be, and I don't know if there's going to be a major economic depression between then and now. So I'm working on the assumption that realistically, 9,900 is what's going to be available to me, which means I can only build 74% of my wish list. Or put another way, I have to lose 414,000 worth of construction. Quite a lot. So what are the options? Well, first of all, as I've said, there's no point cutting the corvettes or the fortifications because they are too small to matter. And I'm not cutting the carriers and the destroyers because I think they're vital. So that gives us these kinds of cut options to make. So we could go for losing a battleship and a heavy cruiser and building no submarines. We could trash the cruiser force and just not build heavy cruisers and light cruisers. You may think that's a daft idea, and as I say it out loud, I think it's a daft idea too. I could go again for the 1 battleship and 1 heavy cruiser and not do the light cruiser improvement. And then finally, I could decimate the cruiser program and not build any submarines. Love to know what you would think of any of those options in the comments below. For me, I'm attracted to option A, the no submarine option if I'm going to fight the Japanese. But if I'm going to fight the British, then I need to do something else. I mean, there's probably an E, which I haven't put down because, you know, I like building battleships, but losing 2 battleships would be, and possibly a light cruiser, would be an option E. So yes, tricky. Another way of approaching this conundrum is to try and see, as you've seen me before, work out a long-term plan. So here we have a 10-year plan. And as you can see, first of all, the Suffren and the Friedland are out. They only have 12-inch guns. They're only 21 knots. They have very, very little room for any kind of modernization. Go over here. If we replace the machinery, if we turn it into oil, and if we try and bring up speed to 25 knots, we have some success, but we still have 12-inch guns, and they only have 80 shells. We can increase this if that's all legal. And aside from blast effects, it would cost us 23,000. Which is relatively modest, but for me, the decider is this. They only have a 9.5-inch belt, and they only have 2-inch deck. Well, 2-inch deck, I'm going to have to live with in other ships, but here, I just don't think this is competitive. It's nice that I can modernize it up to 25 knots, and that's certainly what I'm looking to do with the rest of the old 20-knot legacy fleet, because they can all be rebuilt to 25 knots, oddly enough with the exception of the Marengo and the Ocean, but they are only recent. So towards the end of this period, I'm expecting engine developments to be such that we can rebuild it not to 25 but actually to 28. We can't rebuild any of these older ships to 28 because of the hull form. So I could modernize these 2, but I just think it's a waste of money. And as it is, I need to find some savings. And so they're definitely not going to pass the cut. The Redoutable 13-inch guns, I'm not thrilled by that. It would make it a really easy yes if they were 14-inch guns. They can be modernized to quality 1. They do have 4-inch deck and given a decent anti-air suite. They feel like they're marginal. You could definitely say 13, oh come on, but I still feel they can be useful, so I'm planning to keep them. The Bouvet, 15 inches, only 2-inch deck, but it's the 15 inches that I'm going to retain. They might be ever so fragile, but okay. And the Corbets, 16-inch guns, they've already been extensively modernized and only have 7 16-inch guns. Arguably, that should be brought down to 6 because the single midships gun does cause rate of fire penalties for the secondary armament. As you can see here, this turret, but you know, why lose it? It's a slightly ungainly ship, but if it has any use, then I'm prepared to carry on and modernize that. This is my plan for the next 10 years. Obviously, it will drift, as plans always do. Let's have a look at what we can do with setting the fleet onto a good peacetime basis. So let's go across and have a look at the state of the fleet currently. So we're minus 140, which isn't a bad place to be. If we have a little look at the status, you'll see we have several ships in need of repair, including these 2 whoppers for the battleships. So once they're cleared, that will give us a fair chunk more money. Then I'm keeping in the active fleet a number of carriers and cruisers who have good cruise quality, as well as some destroyers too. Then obviously the corvettes for colonial service, and the rest are mainly mothballed or reserved. I couple of foreign stations who need to move around. As you can see, a lot of the corvettes need refits, and so I'll be jiggling those around over the next few months, pulling them out to refit, sending a cruiser across on foreign station to be a little stopgap so that they can come back and take their correct station. Sort by displacement and go to the ships that we need to sadly say goodbye to. So the Sufferans, thanks very much for the service, chap. Off you go. And there you go. 1,500 nearly. Equally, these two old armoured cruisers, the 25 knotters, I can't get them any faster than that. They've had their time. So that's taken us to a positive monthly balance. It's also given us a few funds to play with. In the air groups, I've mainly put into reserve ships that are only good quality. So the Digsmund here has a couple of veterans. Now I probably need to refit this, sadly. The Panleve, wonderful veterans. The rest, those that are active, are full of veteran and some expert, and then the rest are only good, so they're going into reserve. For the Digsmund, I'm going to take these off and put them into the reserve. And I'm going to have lowered all the intelligence. I'm going to have a quick look at research and just make sure everything's trim. Join me for the next episode. I'll show you what I've done to clean things up and take us into November and the start of peace properly. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. See you next time. Bye for now.